let's get right to the point here. You are not a good person. Now, David, I hope you don't take that personally. And I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about the statement that you are not a good person, David.
Well, says who? says who I am not a good person.
Well, I guess I just said it. No, I don't know. Is that where it starts? Is it that we're running around wondering if everybody thinks we're a good person?
The whole reason I even thought to start this episode with "You are not a good person" was because of something my dad said to me when I was a kid. But when I was born, he said he only really had one request. Like when he talked to my mom, he says, "Well, okay, I just want to do this one thing. Let's never call David a good boy or a bad boy. We are never going to say you're a good boy or you're a bad boy. Because what? Because you just assume everything that comes with good, whether it's yours or not." He says, let's only say that was a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, or let's judge the actions. Good, or let's judge the motivation. Let's judge what you're serving. Not you as a whole. You are not a good boy, right? And I just thought, that what a simple change to make in parenting or in the way you treat yourself. But how profound is that, right?
Very, very enlightened of your father, I'll tell you that, yeah.
Because there's a lot of danger in assuming that someone said it, I just am, right? Oh,
sure. Maybe
you are.
I think it's something that we should be more mindful of. Running around, I'm depressed, and I've suffered from depression a great deal in my life, so I don't say that lightly. But to run around saying it all the time is potentially injurious,
We all think in stories. I mean, that's how we think. We create a hypothetical situation and we place ourselves in it. But we place ourselves as we see ourselves. We place our identity into a hypothetical situation. But if our identity is an oversimplified, I am a good person, I am a bad person, I am an angry person, then as you think through your problems in your life, you are creating false choices for yourself. You're creating needless limitations because you've oversimplified.
It does remind me of our last conversation a little bit, because you finally said it too. I was waiting for you to say it, the oversimplification. Simple's good, right? Oversimplifying, I think, is when it gets problematic. Right? That's when we run.
Simple is like necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
You're not going to get through life without making big, broad generalizations and assumptions. Like, they're necessary. The brain just can't handle all of what I like to call the impossible math, right?
Right. So this falls back into habits, too. Habits are necessary. Routine is necessary, right?
Yes.
Right? I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then you just said something, right? So habits are necessary. But what if an oversimplification becomes your habit?
Yeah, perfect.
Right?
Sure.
And so maybe you're thinking about yourself. Maybe you're thinking, I'm a pretty good person. Now that's an oversimplify. So first of all, you're missing a lot of information. Right?
Right.
But then what if that just becomes a habit? Then you're habitually missing a lot of other information.
Right.
And what are the consequences of that over time?
Well, more than likely, you're going to start feeling like the rest of the world has a lot of issues. Right? Because, I'm just a good... So I don't know why everybody's ganging up on me or why this is working like, what's wrong with the world, right? I mean, I think that could be one outcome of that kind of habitualized thinking, right?
That's why the first thing I said was, says who, right? You are not a good person.
Yeah, I know.
Says
that
who?
Was great.
Says you, says me, says Joe Blow over there, right? Says who?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. So says who, and then how good do you have to be a good person? Is it 90% good? Is it 51% good? Right?
Right.
And then does it count when you're angry? Right? Or what about when you're ignorant about what's actually good or not good in the situation? What if you just don't understand? right?
Sure.
Or what if everyone has ambition. Everyone has, there's always unintended consequences. It gets really complicated really fast. And are we
Sure.
talking about good intentions or are we talking about good outcomes?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, where does that meet? You know what I mean? And how does that matter? Intentions versus outcome or versus action. This might sound a little off, and I'm just going to try it. I remember having a conversation with somebody once where she was expressing to me, like, I just can't understand these people, right? They just, like, it's so obviously wrong, but they just don't seem to see it, and it frustrates the heck out of me. And I said, well, I think, and this is fun too because it goes back to the conversation we had last time. I said, I think what might be helpful for you is to understand that they're standing on a certain rung of the ladder and they just don't see what you're seeing. And, be careful as I tell you this, I said to her, like, I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just saying that the vantage point, what they're able to see and how they see it is different. They're not seeing it at the level that you're seeing it at. And so, therefore, their intention is still probably good. That's kind of why I wanted to say this, right? But their action might not reflect what you think that good is, right? Or what that action should be,
I think it's a safe assumption to think that everybody is acting from good intentions. What they believe are good intentions.
Amen. The world would be a different place. Yeah.
Even when somebody, so you talked about Batman, and I just remember the movie, The Dark Knight, where he's with the Joker, that's real famous, the one that everyone really liked, and the Joker just wants to see it all burn down. And you say, well, he's not acting from good intentions. Well, maybe he thinks it all should burn down.
Right.
Maybe he thinks it's corrupt and it's just a bad world and that it deserves to burn. And so maybe that's a good intention. Right? So I think everyone thinks they're...
Does that make him a good guy?
Yeah, does that make him a good guy? Because, because of the famous quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
Right? So then you think, okay, so don't judge intentions, judge outcomes. But then sometimes people make mistakes. And then do you only judge them on the result of the mistake? Because if they didn't mean to do it, you do judge them differently, and we all believe that you should.
Sure.
So there's a little bit of a dilemma there, which is it? Is it intentions or is it results? And is it results for you or results for the other person? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, here that's a whole nother dimension. Right, of course.
Yeah. Or how about results now versus results 10 years from now? Because something you do now that seems like it was destructive actually causes something beautiful to happen in the future.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And something that you do beautiful now causes damage in the future.
Yeah. Tell me we haven't all lived that. I mean, to some degree or another, right? I mean, I know I have.
Over and over.
This makes me think of part of the problem, if you want to call it that, right? Or why it becomes the wrong conversation if you're running around saying, I'm a good guy, or you're not a good guy, or all that kind of stuff, is that one of the things that's lost is the nuance, right? We're oversimplifying. And it reminds me of a famous quote. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I use this a lot because I think it's so powerful. I wish I could do the whole quote. But it comes from Gurdjieff. Do you know who Gurdjieff is?
Nope.
Yeah, he's like a modern day philosopher / mystic sort of dude. After the World War II era, he was pretty popular for a minute. And very interesting guy. And his quote, to make it really quick, is man's name is legion. So to say that you are this or that is immediate, because the truth is we walk around saying, I'm happy, I'm mad, I'm good, I'm bad, all these things. But meanwhile, the whole time we're saying we're thinking the same I. But the reality is we're living out all these different parts of ourselves in a weird way. Like there's no real unification between us most of the time. Like we're all a little bit schizophrenic, I think is part of what he's trying to point to. Like man's name is legion. You don't, I've said this to people sometimes in some sessions when it was appropriate because it's a heavy thing to say, but you don't know who you are. That's the truth.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a tough truth sometimes, but by saying I'm a good guy or I'm not a good guy, you've limited. The truth is you don't know yourself that well most of the time. You're just running around responding, you know, responding.
Yeah.
And
And
so
how often do you
go ahead,
surprise
yeah.
yourself with your responses?
Sure. Oh God, I still do. I mean, I work hard on this stuff, you know. I still do. It'll be like that. My wife says that one thing, and all of a sudden I snap. And like, what? You know, I love this woman. Where did that come from? You know, like,
Yep.
but it happens. It's
Yeah,
legion.
so are
in
you a
there.
good guy if you catch yourself by surprise? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't
Yeah.
come from what people being shocked by what they saw.
Yeah.
It's by
right.
people being shocked by what they did or what they saw themselves do.
course.
And their whole image of themselves is just blown apart, and they think I can't rely on my own self-knowledge anymore.
I think you just stumbled into the core of why that was a good opening line.
Okay.
You are not a good person. Do you see it? Can you feel that? I can feel it. Like, that's powerful. It's painful. Who wants to look there? But we're all capable of some pretty terrible things, and we don't want to run around dwelling on that, but we need to acknowledge it, you know? We have a shadow side. And it doesn't go away just because we ignore it, you know?
I think it's good to acknowledge it and celebrate it.
Interesting.
Every hero in every movie, if you think about it, they're dangerous people.
Ah, I know. I love that part. Because they have so much power, right?
Well,
Yeah.
if they don't have power, how can they be a hero?
Right. Or the good guy has a dark side, right? That's
Yes.
another. I think that's a more common. You know, like you think about Batman or something as iconic as that, right? That's what his whole persona is in a way.
If you're watching Rambo or Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, I mean they're all dangerous. I mean,
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker was thought of as the ultimate good guy. I mean, he was a pretty nice guy, but why was
Sure.
he a hero? Because he was dangerous, right? He taught himself
Yeah.
to be dangerous. And I mean,
Right.
just to stay on the Star Wars thing for a minute and just to blur the line between good guy, bad guy a little bit. I mean, everyone sees that movie a little differently, I guess, but it's a real famous movie. And to me, the very end of the original saga is that when Luke thinks his friends are going to die and that everything is lost, he does get mad, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Right? Because the Emperor's egging him on, get angry, give in to the dark side, and he starts to do it.
yeah,
And before that, he can't defeat Vader, but when he gets mad, he starts to, he defeats Vader because his dark side came out. And then he catches
Sure.
it, and then he says, okay, I need to put that back away. Then he lays down his, whatever, he lays down his guard or whatever. And then the Emperor says, okay, fine, then I'll destroy you. And then what happens with Vader? Then Vader proves that he's
Right,
not a bad
right.
guy.
He's not such a bad guy.
He's not only a bad guy.
right.
So
right.
what's great about that story is it's the yin and the yang symbol, you know, in a film. It's
Sure.
It's everyone, everything, not just everyone, but everything is both. And that in the good there's some bad, in the bad there's some good, and not only that it
Yes.
is that way, but that it needs to be that way. If Luke didn't touch his dark side for a moment,
Right.
he would have been useless.
Right.
He would have just laid down
Right.
his guard and everything would have been lost. And if Vader didn't put down his identity as the bad guy for a moment, everything would have been lost. And
You know, not to switch it. I mean, because here we are in light. You know, here you are in La La Land talking about Hollywood stuff, and I gotta take it here. You know, to the Rust Belt, as you call it. Or I'm gonna bring it down to dirty. You know, this is part of what I love about the Christ story. You know, I mean, that's one of the things that's so dynamic. He's so dynamic, Jesus, as a figure. You know, because he's the good guy. He's the ultimate good guy too. But he shows many, many times, right? He's a fierce dude, first of all, in a weird way, right? He loses his temper. He calls crap out. I mean, he has no problem with that. I mean, in his day, he was a super rebel. Obviously, that's why he was crucified. And then when you even think about the act that he did on the cross, he was taking on all the sin. That was symbolically what he was doing, right? Which is to say, taking on all the bad, Like he was willing to do that. I mean, I know that makes him a super good guy, but in order for him to do that, and for it to be meaningful, he had to experience it. That's kind of what I'm trying to share, right? That's part of the Christ story, I think. I think, he drinks in weddings and parties, like these are all things that you would never think of. You don't imagine Buddha like that. That's one of the things I love about Jesus, if that makes any sense, right? You just don't see Buddha that way.
Just to bring it back to La La Land, just because my wife mentioned something on the same point when I kind of told her what we were going to talk about. I didn't even get into the details. Yeah. I just said, you are not a good person. And then I may have said something, but that you're both, right? You're a little bit of both, and you need to be. And she just said Schindler's List, and I'm like, what about Schindler's List? He was a good guy. She goes, at the beginning of the movie, he's just a shrewd businessman.
Oh yeah,
using the people in the camps to make himself an easy buck, and he's shrewd and he's selfish and he's just making his way. But then he becomes very successful and very powerful. In fact, he becomes necessary through his shrewdness and selfishness. I mean, if I'm remembering the film correctly, it's been a while.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
But then because he elevates himself to a position of power, then he's able to do great good when he wants.
I'm curious here. Hopefully I don't derail us too much, but this is interesting. Like, again, this is why this is fun, that it's so spontaneous. So the word power and the concept of power and danger, right, keep reoccurring in this conversation. And it's interesting to me because when you think of it in an energetic level, like almost like electricity, right? There's a negative and a positive, right? This is where we get power from, like that interplay, right? So in other words, is it possible that us kind of understanding or becoming more aware of the negative and positive within us, our legion, that we come to know our power? Does that resonate at all?
Well, if you only know half yourself, or if you're only willing to know half yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you're only willing to see the good in yourself and not the dark side or the shadow side.
Or the vice versa, because there's plenty of people that do the opposite. They only see the bad in themselves, right?
Yes.
Sure. Go ahead, finish the sentence.
And then they oversimplify, I'm a bad person, and then they get in a habit, and then the simplification becomes a habit. The title bad guy comes with all of its archetypal baggage as well. Then you start to become what you think a bad guy is instead of what you actually are. And then you actually right, the whole thing is a self-fulfilling cycle. But exactly what you said, I think that it pays to know all of yourself as much as you can.
Yes. Yeah.
The best way I've heard it said is that you want to know that you're capable of the bad stuff or the dangerous stuff. You want to know that you can do it, and you want to be capable of it, but you also want you want the ability to control it or keep it at bay.
Sure.
Right? So you don't want to. So when I say it's good to get to know your dark side, it's not that you need to go out there and just be evil and bad all the time and hurt things and people and blow stuff up. It's that you want to acknowledge it.
Man,
yourself.
You got a big smile on your face.
Yeah. Well, I just think when I've seen people say,
"Are you looking forward to blowing something up, Dave?" No, go ahead.
Well, think about when you were a kid, right? So when I was a kid.
Yes. Oh,
you try on torturing stuff. It can be a sibling.
I do remember.
It can be an animal, right?
Yeah.
Right. You try on hurting things. Every time we got fireworks, we grew up a long time ago. We had fireworks, so we would just get little G.I. Joe guys and stick a firework in them and see how fun it was to blow them apart. I mean, what were we doing?
Of course.
We were exploring that side of ourselves.
Of course.
What do you do whenever, when you start dating, and maybe you're the one who can take or leave the relationship more than the other person, and you decide you want to break up, and there's a part of you that wants to be nice, and there's also a part of you that just wants to be like, so there, right? If you haven't been broken up with and been humbled, know what that feels like. I've seen that dark side come out where you're just kind of like, you like that power. You like that power over them.
Oh, sure. Oh, of course. You know, it's kind of ironic that this comes up. We were just hanging out with some friends yesterday having dinner, and this conversation came up about the fact that there was some part of my wife and I's relationship in the beginning. I think, our relationship was very quick in the fact that of how it progressed, Mm-hmm. And there was a point where I started really acting up, like I think there was some part of me that knew she was the one and was a bit terrified by it. And so I decided to test the limits with her. Now, this wasn't so conscious, right? But man, I was just all kinds of not very kind behavior. I mean, all kinds of things. How my wife actually made it through, I don't even know. But I certainly, there was something in me testing that. Like, well, what if I'm this? What if I'm not such a good guy? Are you still around? Are you still going to be there? And that was not a fair game to play. And again, it was even quite subconscious, but it definitely was played.
It is a fair game because she did it to you too.
Oh, it is a fair game.
It is a fair game.
Yeah, okay.
Because you got to test somebody before you lock yourself into a life with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure I did it in the most appropriate ways, but yeah.
Well, the dark testing can't be that appropriate. I'm not saying that you should put your potential partner through absolute hell and torture, but I don't know of a relationship that I've gotten in where the girl I was dating didn't... You're in that honeymoon phase where everything is good, and then one day, and usually when they decide that they're going to take you very seriously, it turns.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's a drama.
I think that's about when that happened for us. Yeah.
Drama,
That's it.
or there's an attack, or there's a challenge to your character, or there's I'm going to go out and talk to Bobby now and see what you do about it, right?
Right.
What are they doing, right? They're using their dark side to test you and to poke at you a bit to see what you do.
Sure.
And how you respond, and they need to do that to get trust or to know. You're talking about getting to know all of yourself is a powerful thing, but also getting to know both sides of whoever you're connecting with is an important thing.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I think it's a challenging thing, especially because most of us are not that in touch with that, right? In other words, the legion part of ourselves. So, of course, especially in the beginning of a relationship, we're doing so much hard work on making sure we only show the good side and all that sort of stuff. And we don't even, sometimes that's super conscious, sometimes it's not, right? We're just doing what feels natural because, but meanwhile, all this stuff's lurking. I think my dark side came out quick in our relationship. My wife's dark side took a long time. It was probably a decade before I got to see oh, wow, you got something else going on there, you know what I mean? And she's a beautiful person, obviously, but we all have it. We all have certain things, right? And they're different.
She's a complete
Hers are
person,
very different
though.
from mine.
Yeah,
she's a complete person. And I love that.
She's a complete person.
Now, there's something else that I would like to, and this is going to shift it pretty hard. So we'll just see where it goes. But shift away, okay. Part of this, you said, well, who says so, right? You are not a good person. Well, who says so, right? I would also say, so who are we talking about? See, this legion that I keep referring to anyways, right, is a certain aspect to ourselves. It's the part of ourselves that is in the spiritual world is called the small self, right? Small s, right? And it comes with all this baggage. It comes with all this complexity. It comes with all this good and bad and dark, the dualistic nature that we experience as this. But there is another part to ourselves that I would say, that I'm going to propose, I think it's interesting to point out here, that is ultimately good. That there is, go ahead. You got something I want to see?
I just want a definition of good.
It's sort of the difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness, if that makes any sense. This is getting way off, but meaning that this is a much higher level where the good and bad drop, the meaning of that kind of drops out because it just is. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, in other words, there's just this, and it doesn't mean that there isn't good and bad value, but we're slightly detached from what that means so that we can actually look at it, first of all. Right? Because when we're running around with the good, bad all the time, it's hard to actually, we're so steeped in that whole orientation that it's hard to actually see outside of it, right? But there is a part of us that is capable of that. That's all I want to say. And when I say that it's good, I mean that it's capable of holding all of that. And it does that actually quite peacefully. That's the strange thing. And I think that would be, like, I love when Eckhart Tolle said, somebody said, well, what do you mean by good? He said, well, or bad, they think it was. And he said, well, like bad like a stomach ache. Like, you can't really argue with that, right? I mean, it's like a stomach ache, it just doesn't feel good, right? So there's a part of ourselves that feels good. And I'm just going to wrap this up with this one thing that I talk about many, many times, and it's the way that I like to try to prove this, right? Whenever you relax, whenever you let go of all this good and bad, and all your hopes and for the future, and all your worries about the past, and all your worries about the future, all that stuff, whenever you let go and you relax, you feel good. This is a taste of your true self, if you will, capital S, right? Like, what's underlying all this chaos, all this craziness, all this complexity, all this legion. I think it's useful and hopeful in a way to point it out. That's why I wanted to include this in the conversation, if it even makes it, right? Because it is there, I truly believe. Like, I build my whole entire teaching around that fact, that ultimately, even the Joker is good somewhere, right? Even, right,
Well, so an image comes to mind that we're talking about. There's a danger in oversimplification, right? At the beginning, like, if you just call yourself a good guy or a bad guy, or if you call yourself ugly or stupid or whatever simplified identity you give yourself. No, it's much more than that. There's way more to it. You're missing a lot of nuance, and then all of a sudden, it gets really big. It actually gets so complicated, you could never figure it out or even understand it all. So there can be so much nuance, you're just drowning in nuance.
Yes.
And you can't understand it. And it just gets infinitely big, right? So you start from oversimplified, you get infinitely big, but then on the other side of all that nuance, once you start to work it out, it just comes right back down to being super simple again. So it's like this. It's like this little.
So you really are a good person. You see, that's the thing. Well, you're not a good person.
In the biggest of big pictures, beyond what we can even see. Yeah, and so
when you zoom out of the planet and you look at the big blue marble or the little blue marble, when you're zoomed out, it's so peaceful.
It's so peaceful.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's so pristine, And then you zoom into New York City or LA, it's not quite so, you're right, but
yeah, well, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of energy happening, right, between polarities, right? I always think that I'm a music guy. I work in the studio world. I look at waveforms all day, which are these up and down little things. So we talk about polarity, right? A positive goes above the line and a negative goes below the line. And the louder something is, the more it goes above and below the line, the more polarity there is. We're in a world where there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of volume, there's a lot of loudness, so there's a lot of polarity. But suddenly you zoom out enough and it just becomes a whole piece of music. Right? And like it's like a whole other level. You go from little up and down volume shifts to suddenly become a whole piece of music, and suddenly it's beautiful. So there's a lot of up and down, in a Beethoven symphony. But are you going to say that the Beethoven symphony isn't just beautiful? Maybe that took me a long time to wrap that.
No, that was
as
beautiful.
A metaphor.
Yeah.
But I think that's in line with what you're saying.
It is absolutely.
But it couldn't be beautiful without all the back and forth, the polarity, the tension, the release, the quiet, the loud, and then that wraps back around to what you were saying about it's good to get to know both sides of yourself. Then you talked about your wife showed you her dark side later, and now you love it.
Sure.
But it's not that she's a good person or a bad person. She's a complete person.
Right.
She contains,
Right.
and you were talking about I am legion, which to me means that we're not one personality. We actually have a legion of personalities within us.
Exactly.
And then I think
Right.
of Walt Whitman's quote, "I contain multitudes."
Yes.
Have you ever right?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, yeah.
Do I contradict myself? Okay, I contradict myself. I am large.
Right.
I contain
I love
multitudes, or whatever the I'm
Right.
butchering it, but.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I couldn't do it either. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And it's beautiful because, but the multitudes are necessary for the beauty. I think, right? The whole thing is anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the key too. To me, it's all about zooming in and zooming out, zooming in and zooming out. You know, we're almost bringing it home right now. That's how I feel like that's what we're doing here. We're already getting to the bring it home part of the of our talk here. But I think that's the trick in a certain way, right? I mean, because if you're zoomed in, this comes back to the thing we talked about, like the forest and the trees, or I can't remember the metaphor you used last week, or where you can't see it, right? Because you're too in. That's why you need to zoom out, right?
Yeah.
If you're always thinking I'm a good person or I'm a bad person, you're missing so much, right? So then you need to zoom out, but you need a way to do that. That's kind of what I was trying to point to, the fact that if you take a deep breath, right, and you relax, and you just kind of let it go for a moment, it's a beautiful, very visceral way of backing out a little bit. That's why people encourage you. Take a deep breath, man. You're losing it, right? You're getting out of perspective here. And it really does help, especially the more conscious you do that, right? If you're accessing that space, right, where you're realizing there's something to be gained here. Let me take a deep breath, relax for a moment, and see if I can zoom myself out of this concept of, especially if you're inner criticizing yourself or something, right? Like when you're doing that, you are definitely dialing in a little too much into the same area, right?
You talked about the backwards step in Buddhism.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the timeless metaphor of just take a step back for a minute, which means zooming out.
That's what it was, yeah.
A little bit to get outside of the bubble or outside of the conversation. We're talking about conversation, so we're talking about let's go to the next level of conversation. Let's zoom out and let's talk on this outer layer instead of the inner layer for a minute. And
Right.
And that helps sometimes get perspective. But then also, like you said, you have to be able to zoom back in. Simplifying is necessary.
Right.
So the trick that we're talking about here, I think, and what we're coming down to is that the goal is not to always be zoomed out. The goal is not to always be simplified. It's to gain the ability to be flexible between those two places, and focus where it's most meaningful at the moment.
Yeah, first to recognize that this is something useful to do, right?
Yeah.
That maybe you're narrowing in too much. I mean, that's the first step, right? Recognize, gosh, I'm thinking the same thought, I'm having the same conversation in my head over and over and over again, right? And then to say, okay, I know there's value in stepping out. Step out, and then to say, okay, I got a better thing, and then to come back in and say, what am I missing? Let me see some more detail. Let me see some more sides to myself, right? I mean, like this just happened actually with that comment I made about how I responded to my wife. She said something silly, and I mean, it was a very, very minute thing, right? But I felt the energy shift in myself, right? In other words, where I responded to her in a way that I was kind of like, that was kind of like, you didn't need to respond like that, And then so the next day, though, that was still with me because, that's kind of where our relationship is, right? The small things matter now. We've taken care of a lot of the big things, right? And so I'm reflecting on that, and I needed to go there. Like, in other words, I needed to feel the darkness that came from, if that makes any sense, right? But I don't get lost there. I acknowledge the darkness a little bit, like, oh, gosh, you must have been fine. And then I back out again. Anyways.
You don't get lost there because you acknowledge the darkness.
Right. That's right, David. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Well, you have to, like you said, if you're hiding a certain part of yourself from yourself,
Right.
your dark side,
Right.
your anger, or you're hiding it from your wife, like how long can you hide that?
Right.
Because it takes a lot of energy to suppress a part of yourself, and eventually
It
you
does.
run out of energy, or you're too out of control, or you're too distracted by something else, and then it erupts, and
Right.
then that's when it gets dangerous. When the dark side is not understood or controlled or able to be worked with, that's when you get yourself in trouble. So because you took a moment to sit and acknowledge it,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
feel it,
Exactly.
then it could pass, or then you could see what it had to tell you, or see what it had to say. Like you said, you're a
Sure.
legion. There's one voice in the legion.
Right.
Okay, what you really want to speak? What do you have to say? This.
Yeah.
Okay. Zoom
Right.
back out. Right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and this comes from, and this is the point, I suppose, of us doing this, the wrong conversation, is to help people maybe see or to even exemplify, meaning like to show, look, I screw up, we do these things, and the value, again, it's not about the right answer, it's about having a process, right? Like you said last time, which I loved. So in other words, this is something that I've realized over the years, this is useful. Take a
Yes.
look. It's not going to kill me. And actually, it'll behoove me and my wife and my kids and my neighborhood. You know what I mean? Because the more I befriend that, the more I'm not afraid of it, the more I'm not trying to hide it or run from it or pretend it's twisted into something else, the more the actual underlying good can come out. That's how I feel, actually. That's where that comes from, too. That whole, what's lying underneath, That's
If you
my...
Get to know your shadow, get to know your dark side, so you have a relationship with it, so you have some control over it, so you can call upon it if necessary, but so it doesn't call upon you.
That's it.
So it doesn't possess you.
Peter Gabriel has a great line. I'm a really big fan. You know that. I own my fears so they do not own me.
Exactly. See, that's why Peter
Right.
Gabriel's an absolute genius. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
But to own your fears, what do you have to do? I mean, okay,
you have to be...
let's go back to Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Obi-Wan has taught you well. You have control of your fear. Because he faced it, right?
Right.
He goes in the swamp
Right.
with Yoda, and he goes and he faces it. He acknowledges the darkness that is in him, so therefore he has it.
Yeah.
That's why the movie lasts. That's why it lasts down the generations. So we talk about bringing it home, and I think that what we mean by bring it home is, okay, good, David and Adrien, we get it. We're not a good person, we're not a bad person, nuance is good, simplification is okay. How do I do this? How do I let go? How do I zoom out?
Right.
How do I get
Right.
to know my dark side? How do I integrate it in with the rest of me in a way that is best?
Yeah,
That
in
would
a
be
way that's
good-
pragmatic too. That
Yes.
that works for my life. That makes a difference in my life. Right.
Exactly.
On the ground.
That's
That's
what bringing
what
home is all about. How? How do we
Exactly,
do
that's what
this
bringing home
on
is
the
all
ground right now in our lives? So, how?
The first thing that I always try to talk to people about is to cultivate a willingness to do so. Meaning like, first, I think a big part of that, we've already said it, but is to realize the value in it. So once you can see that there's something valuable here, then it's important to look inside and find that willingness. And, you might not be able to on the big thing, right? Like, like if you really have an issue with so-and-so and you just can't find the willingness to work on that one, that may be too big. Set that aside. Find something that you're willing to look at about yourself, right? And start there. And just start by cultivating a little bit of willingness. Because if you don't have that, you're just playing games, first of all, right? Like, you're not really going to probably get very far. Like, you have to be willing to look. We have this in our description too, or in our intro, sincere seekers.
Sincere.
Sincerity.
Yeah.
Sincerity, man. And that's not perfection.
Humble.
You know, we're not
humbled but hopeful.
Yeah, humbled.
Sincere. There's
right.
a reason why we chose those words. Yeah.
There is. They're powerful words, and most of those came from you, and they're beautiful. They're perfectly said. I mean, so that's the willingness, though, right? And hopefully, if you're here, you're not just distracting yourself with another YouTube or podcast. You know, that you're actually willing and interested in doing something about this. You know, I know that you are, David, and I think you know that I am. That's why we're here. There's a willingness. That's all I'm trying to point out.
I borrowed that from you. Willingness is a thing that you brought up to me. That's yours, and I think I put it into another little video I made where I was talking about how to change, how to make a change in your life on the ground. And a lot of people think it's about willpower. I'm going to apply force. But with willpower, you run out of energy, you run out of motivation, you can talk yourself out of it. So instead, try willingness, which just means to sit back and accept what comes your way. Right? Yeah. Allow yourself to see what's there. Allow yourself to breathe it in and to accept it and to explore it.
To feel it. Yeah.
Well, I often say willingness over willpower, but I've kind of changed it. I think that willingness is the source of your willpower. Because once you see, once you allow yourself to see what's really happening more deeply, that's what supports your willpower to make a change. Because once you see, you can't unsee.
That's it.
If you really want power, build your willingness. Build your ability to sit and allow and to build energy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because we talked about that conversation, the zooming in and zooming out. If you don't have much energy, you're stuck in the zoom in. Right. As you increase your energy, you're able to zoom out. But not only are you able to zoom out, you're able to zoom out and see the whole picture, which means that you can, at will, zoom in to all these different areas and zoom out once you have the energy. It's freedom.
Yes.
I think the reason why it's so hard to do, it sounds easy. Oh, just sit back and allow it. But you don't know what's going to come at you when you do that.
Yeah, sure.
There's reasons why people don't sit and just be willing.
Right.
I just want to acknowledge that because I think that as we suggest people just be willing, it's still a bit ambiguous, right? Because what are you going to be faced with? So when you practice willingness, how do you do it? Like, what do you do?
There's an acknowledgement of the fact that there's value there, right? Like, in other words, that there's something beyond all the noise, all the chaos, all the confusion, all of the oscillating back and forth, right? There's something beyond. I can sense it somehow, right? And so because of that, I become willing, which is to say that I see the value. I don't know, this is eluding me, David. I see the value in taking the time to see beyond the surface of things, right? To see beyond where I might be, the trees, so to speak, right? Like, so then when I see that I'm lost, maybe is the first thing. This is the thing about, like, remember what we said last time, you're having the wrong conversation. Well, sometimes the wrong conversation is the right conversation, right? You have to have that first, right?
You have to get through it.
If you're experienced, well, because it helps you see what the right one might be, right? It's like that whole "it takes 1,000 failures to make the success" or whatever. They're not failures anyways. They're the things on the way to success, right? So to feel the pain, like, let's use the example we used already. Like, when I felt that I did that to my wife, and I could see the shift in her a little bit, but I could even see it more in myself. I could feel the pain. There was pain there, a little bit, just a little bit. Like, I love her. I don't want to treat her like that, So once I felt that pain, I knew it was a trigger for me to say, okay, you need to look at that. You need to look at that. No, it wasn't appropriate then because there was a lot of things going on. That's why I took time the next day to kind of reflect on that. And that's when I accessed my willingness to look, if that makes any sense. So,
and it's not comfortable to look at. It's not comfortable to
No,
say,
it's not.
I caused pain. Let me really get in touch with what I caused.
Yeah, right. And it
Right?
was small. You know, I don't want to overplay this, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, you know, I think that's another thing that's really important. Like, if this isn't something you've worked on a lot, it's important to start small. You know, I think what happens is you build willingness, or you exercise some willingness, you cultivate some willingness to look, and then you realize that you have the power to do so. So then that builds your willingness. Because that's a lot of times why we don't do it, right, David? Like, people don't want to look because they feel like they're going to be defeated by it. Like, they don't have the power
Yes.
to do it.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's gonna be a tsunami almost. Like, it's gonna overtake them, and they're not gonna have the ability to do it. You know?
Why aren't you willing? Because you're defending yourself. What are you defending yourself from? Well, you might be wrong. You might learn that you're wrong. You might learn that you're not working from the best intentions. You might learn that you can't articulate yourself. You might learn that everything that you've built your life on is kind of not accurate. Right? As soon as you're willing, that means you're willing to see all of that, and that's scary stuff. Your whole image
is.
of your life or
Absolutely.
of your whole identity can fall apart right in front of you. That's why a lot of people don't want to be willing. So that's why you say
Sure.
start in small pieces, because
Yes.
you know, don't disintegrate all of yourself at once.
No, exactly.
but do it on purpose, piece by piece. But
That's
but
it.
Do disintegrate yourself on purpose as much as you can chew.
So that's why it's good to start small with something that you do have the ability to deal with. Realize that you do, and then it's this cycle, what I would call the spiral, right, David? Like, we go around and around, feels like nothing's happening, but we are doing something. We're going a little deeper into this whole subject of willingness and power, what I always call authentic personal power, right? Getting in touch with that's how I can do it, right? Whether it's big or small, because I've worked hard on that, you know? This is some of the challenges I see in our modern approach to things. It's about technique. It's about tips and tricks.
Hacks. Life
Burnout,
hacks.
man. Yeah, life hacks, exactly. That works for about 2 seconds. You know?
Yeah.
Because if you haven't cultivated that willingness to actually apply those things and to go a little deeper than those things typically will be willing to go, right? It'll burn out. You're going to have whatever it is, right? Your diet, your relationship, you know, it'll be great for 2 seconds and then it's done, right? If you don't
You can
cultivate
only push
the
the
willingness,
machine so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because technique is effort and it's willfulness and it's all these things that require energy, and eventually you run out of energy in the moment. I think one of the reasons why you can do it now and why you know that there is value in facing it is because you've taken the time to develop a relationship with that place. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what a spiritual path is developing a relationship with that place where, yes, up front, you may not want to confront it. You may not want to look at it. You don't want to look into the void. You don't want to face the existential dread.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of jokes about, you know, being an adult is just like just keeping yourself busy enough to avoid the existential dread or something like that.
Right. Definitely our
Right?
culture. Yeah.
But a spiritual path is just allowing the existential dread to come and sit in front of your face. And I think, but once you do that, and then once you develop a relation, and then see the value of doing it, and then you can go back and forth, and then you know when you're in that place on the ground where you're not getting anywhere, you know that well, let me go face the pain, let me go face the dark side, let me go face the dread, let me go face whatever is waiting there for me, whatever it may be, and allow me to sit with it, allow me to give it its voice for a moment, so that it can be integrated, so that I can move forward.
Integrated.
You know?
Yeah, I'm going to go off on a little thing here again too. Now,
Integrated is the word.
this is the most.
Yeah.
This is the most beautiful thing about being a human being. We're transmuting machines. What's your thing? You said you have a shirt that says anti-entropic device or something like that, right?
Anti-entropic device, yes.
Right. Which is to say, though, that we have the power within us to transmute whatever it is. You know, I just did a video the other day about appreciating beauty. And I said that when you take the time to appreciate beauty, when you open yourself to beauty, you actually bring beauty to the world. Like you are bringing in beauty to the world, because where else does it come from? A flower is just, somebody can walk on it, trample it, spray poison on it, right? Where's the beauty? Right? But if you take the time to appreciate that flower, you are actually ushering in beauty. You're a transmutational machine. You know what I mean? Like you're bringing in beauty. You can bring in depth.
You just encapsulated the movie we watched last night.
Really?
So we had a family movie night, which everyone knows this story. We watched Charlotte's Web.
Oh my God, I love Charlotte's Web. Go ahead.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does one of the ending lines of the story is, because someone stopped to see the beauty in the humblest of creatures, right?
Yeah.
Everything was changed. Like,
Right.
because Wilbur the pig was willing to see the beauty of Charlotte the spider, where everyone else is like, ew, spider. They didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
A spider scares them. Let's just avoid the spider. Let's not look.
Perfect.
And Wilbur
Yeah.
allows and is willing to see the spider, right? And because of that, he saves his own life. Right? He doesn't just
yeah.
transforms everyone around it. And I just thought, well, that's why that story endures as well. And I think that wraps up exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
It does, and there's a reciprocity there too, right? Because she sees the beauty in him, and then she helps
Yes.
everybody see that. The
Yes.
pig. It just looks like a normal pig to me. No, I know he is kind of radiant, right? Because she
Yeah.
points it out, right? I love it. I think that's honestly a beautiful. I think maybe if we want to summarize this talk right here, would be to say to be willing to look at the fact that you are not a good person, and that right, and that the truth is though you are. There's more going on than any preconceived notion of good or bad or right, all that stuff. There's. And when you look, you're bringing that into the world, into your life. That depth, that meaning, that.
Yes, yeah, you see the beauty of the big picture. You see how it's all working together. You see the nuance. The more you see it, the more you respond to that. Not this oversimplified identity with all of its baggage and all of that stuff. So you allow yourself to be yourself.
Right.
Right?
And others to be them. Yeah.
Yes, and others to be them, and the world to be the world. And so there you have it. You are not a good person. You're also not a bad person. You are a complete person. And the more you get to know yourself as a complete person and discover and create more willingness to get to know yourself as a complete person, well, the closer you will get to a better conversation. And because we do call this the wrong conversation, we like to see where we went wrong. And we also like to see where you've learned that you were having the wrong conversation on this subject and how you discovered a better conversation. We love those stories.
Yeah. Share example, as I said last time too. We all learn best from example. So anybody who shares something like that is probably doing a great service to anybody who stumbles across it, right? Because they'd be like, "Oh God, I know that."
Yes.
Oh, I've been
please
there
add your
before.
voice to the conversation because it may not be something we say here that helps somebody. It might be something that
That's
they
right.
read from you that helps somebody.
Right. Yeah.
So,
definitely.
If anyone out there is enjoying these conversations, please save us, like us, subscribe to us, check back with us each week. We're going to be doing more and more and more of these.
I think next week's conversation should be pretty interesting because we're both married individuals and we're going to be talking about how your marriage is going to suck. So I hope you'll join us for that conversation.
And if you're not married, don't worry about it. This applies to all of your other relationships. Any relationship you care about sucks.
At some point, right, David? I look forward to talking about it, bro.
Me too. See you next week.
Can't wait.